So- hi, dear ones. Are you hearing me well? Yeah, great. Okay. Um, so Dorothy is also with us. We're both back from our silent retreat last month. And Dorothy doesn't have such a good internet connection, so I think we'll keep her video off. Um, but I will welcome us and get us started. She'll put some things in the chat. About our community for anyone who's new. Um, and we are so happy to see all of you joining. We had 173 or so people register for this event tonight. Often those who are actually able to come is a little less, but they'll get the recording. So we do ask everyone to stay muted when you're not speaking. And if you can be on camera, that helps to connect us to each other, to create community. We'll open up the chat at the beginning to hear from you in the chat how you're doing, what you're how you're arriving here, a brief check-in. And then we'll close it during the meditation time and for the talk that Matthew will offer us. And then we'll open it again when we open the space for questions and answers with Matthew. There is a way to save the chat. If you'd like to do that, you can go to the three dots on the bottom of the chat. If you open up the chat, it has the dialogue bubble on the bottom. And if you click on the three dots in there, there's an option. There should be an option to save the chat. But it'll come with the recording as well. So, and we have put information in the chat about donations. We really want to support Matthew Fox's incredible work. So if you haven't already sent a donation and you'd like to, you can do that after the session at the links there, and we'll be sharing that with Matthew. So a few announcements before we check in. We are going to kind of be reformulating a little bit how we uh, uh, offer this group. So we're actually going to take a little bit of time to think about how we're going to offer it. So we won't meet in November, but we will meet Tuesday, December 10th. And it looks like there's already a Zoom link that Dorothy has put together. So she'll put that in the chat. Also, it's the same time, Tuesday, 7:30 to 9 Eastern. And this will be a practice of examine, an Ignatian practice on reviewing the year. So that's going to be our final meeting of the year. Also, just to let you know, we haven't been seeing too many people in our mentoring, so we're going to pause on the small group mentoring. And also to let you know, Adam will be joining us at 8 p.m. Eastern. Wasn't able to come at 7:30. So I think those are the announcements. And so we'd love to just invite you to, maybe we could just take a breath together and just feel our bodies, noticing we are 70 people in the room now, and just feeling ourselves coming into this moment, into our bodies, into our breath. We may have had a busy day, so letting ourselves release our muscles. And let's take 3 of the deepest breaths we've taken all day. A deep inhale. And long, slow exhale. Once again, deep inhale. Long, slow exhale. And one more time, deep, deep, filling up the belly, filling up the lungs, and releasing all of that air. And then just letting yourself breathe normally as you just check in and maybe notice what's here, what's alive. What are you looking forward to tonight as we explore this very important topic with Matthew Fox, his new book, Trump and MAGA as the Antichrist? And yeah, what are you bringing? What are you needing? What's alive for you today? And if you'd like to put a word or two in the chat to capture that, please do. How do you find yourself arriving here? What's alive? What are you noticing? And we'll give folks some time to read through this, and I'll read a few as well. So a lot of gratitude, weary yet grateful, busyness, looking forward to centering, relaxed, frustration, anticipation, appreciating the cool temperatures with the fall weather, tired, curious, open, anxious about Milton, gratitude for grounding practices. Yes, there's so much in the air at the moment with the hurricanes. We really ask all of our ancestors to protect those that are in the path of the hurricane. We call on all of the great beings' support. Curiosity. Grateful to be here with our group, feeling sad and lonely and looking to connect more deeply with myself tonight. Apocalypse as an unveiling. Yeah. Gratitude, looking deeply into emotions, feeling peaceful today, grateful to be together in community again, encouraged. Thank you, dear ones, for your checking in, and we'll continue to let a few more folks offer their reflections. And I'll just invite us to spend the next 20 minutes in meditation. And the meditation that I'll offer us is really a practice of connecting to our ancestors for support, for grounding, for connection. In the Buddhist tradition, we talk about three kinds of ancestors. We often, in the West, we think of having blood ancestors, the ancestors in our family line, whether we are adopted or within our family of genetic family. But in Buddhism, there's two other kinds of ancestors that we refer to, and those are the spiritual ancestors, the ancestors that have shaped and nourished our own family in whatever tradition that might be. And It doesn't have to be organized religion. It could also be humanism. It could be, people who have worked for human rights or social change that has really impacted us or our family. And they might be our spiritual ancestors. And then the third category is land ancestors, those who created and built up the country that we live in, or maybe that we grew up in or find ourselves in now. So I'll just invite us to connect with those three sources. They're a kind of stream that flows into us, supporting us, nourishing us. We wanted to offer this meditation tonight because of all the volatility in the world right now. And when we think of these ancestors, it's like a tree connecting to its roots down deep in the earth. If we're not connected to our roots, it's much easier for us to be blown down, blown away. So this is an invitation to reflect on what are all the strengths, the wisdom, the creativity, the power of these different kinds of ancestors that flow into us. And we don't have to know them personally. Like even in our family line, we can connect to those that we know, but if we don't have a clear sense of our grandparents or great grandparents, we can connect to a larger group of strong people who've survived enough for us to be here, and passed on their language, their culture, their songs, their stories, their physical abilities, their mental abilities. So we'll reflect on that. And when we reflect on our ancestors, of course, we also know that our ancestors have transmitted things that aren't what we want to continue in our lives as well. They had suffering, they had difficulties. So we also can allow the suffering of our ancestors to be released into the earth, to be transformed, that we can be part of transforming their suffering so that we don't continue to pass on that intergenerational suffering. So, find whatever position is comfortable for you to be at ease, but also alert. For anyone that is feeling tired, feel free you could be in a lying position for this meditation. If you are in a space that allows you to do so, you could also open your eyes, close your eyes. But you want to be allowing for both ease, letting go, resting, as well as presence, dignity, alertness, aliveness. So both of those qualities. So feeling your body. Feeling your breath. And every place where your body is connected to chair or floor or bed, whatever you're lying on. When you inhale, feel those points of connection. And when you exhale, release the weight of your body into those points of connection. Let the breath support opening and letting go. Feel the air flowing in as you breathe in, flowing out as you breathe out. Not changing or altering your breath in any way. Just noticing and being present with the breath, whether your breath is short or long, fast or slow. Just honoring your breath. Resting in your breath. The breath we're breathing now is available to us because our ancestors breathed. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. So we are breathing in this moment, and this breath is also the breath of our ancestors. They are breathing with us. Because without our family ancestors, we would not have this body, we would not exist. Let yourself breathe and be in touch with your family line, the strengths of your family, ancestors, parents, grandparents, other relatives that have transmitted themselves to you. As you breathe, notice what positive or wholesome or healthy elements are there in your family lineage that flow into you. Connect to the fact that your ancestors tried to live a good life and transmit the best they could to their children, their grandchildren. They may not have always been successful. Because of the suffering that they endured. And there were many strengths. What are the strengths that you can connect with from your blood or family line? Let those strengths flow into you, knowing that you're not separate from your heritage. your blood ancestors. Just as you're not separate from your descendants, those in your family that come after you, whether your direct children or the young people in your family, in your community. What are the strengths? What are the qualities of your ancestors that you want to pass on to the next generation? How can the strengths of your ancestors support you to meet this moment of great challenge in our world today? Call upon your ancestors to support you, protect you, offer you guidance. Offer us all guidance. And now reflect on your spiritual ancestors, those who nurtured the spiritual tradition of your family or whatever tradition has shaped your life. It may be multiple traditions. We are in a Buddhist Christian gathering here, so you may have many streams of spiritual ancestors. Connect with the goodness of these ancestors, how they wanted to preserve and pass on their spiritual traditions that support inner and outer transformation, that help to deepen our capacity to love and to create justice in our world, to bring about equality and freedom for all beings everywhere. Breathe with your spiritual ancestors, feeling their strength, their wisdom, their compassion flow into you. Connecting with the purity of heart of our ancestors who were the mystics of many traditions, Saint Francis, Hildegard of Bingen, Saint John of the Cross, Rumi, Shantideva, Milarepa, and the modern saints and sages, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Harriet Tubman, Thich Nhat Hanh, Dorothy Day, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela. Calling on these spiritual ancestors. They're also our land ancestors for their guidance, their support, their strength. They exist in us. We are not separate from them. If we claim them as our ancestors, they exist in every cell of our body. It's beautiful humans who manage to overcome and endure so much and change things in a fundamental way. Mahagosananda, who walked in peace throughout Cambodia after mass killing in his country, proclaiming the message of forgiveness, of love. So many beautiful spiritual land ancestors that are available to us right now. Who do you want to call on? Who do you want to invite into your heart right now? What can we bring into our world today from these vast, loving arms of these many, many spiritual ancestors? How can we transmit what they have transmitted to us into our world today? They made a way out of no way. So can we. We're walking in their footsteps. We'll close the practice with the sound of the bell, and whatever quality or energy you've been in touch with from the ancestors, let that fill your heart as we listen to the bell, and let it flow out to all corners of the cosmos, carried by the sound of the bell. Thank you for your practice, dear community. And I'll introduce our very beloved guest now. I'll spotlight Matthew and myself as I introduce you. I am going to, Matthew, I'm going to read the personal introduction that Adam wanted me to share, and then I'll say a few words, and then we'll offer a very brief regular bio that people may have read also. So Adam, this is Adam's reflection. Matthew Fox has been a friend and mentor in my life. I first discovered him as a theology student when I came across one of his books. And later, when I was just starting my work with homeless youth, I met him in person. He showed up like a true elder, offering wisdom and encouragement, but most of all, giving me permission to trust my intuition about what my life needed to be. This developed into a friendship, and I have been privileged to know him for 2 decades now. I also wanted to say that Matthew preached a sermon during my first Mass after I was ordained a priest. I'm inspired by his courage, how he consistently has been able to take on institutions and leaders like the Church or the Pope, always reminding us that our values and our integrity really matter. He has helped so many of us rethink spirituality, reconnecting us to the wisdom of old mystics like Meister Eckhart, Hildegard, and Howard Thurman. He showed us that the earth, art, and our bodies are sacred and are places of divine revelation when approached with reverence. Over the years, we've worked together on a book, Occupy Spirituality. It's about young people's spirituality, and done many events. I'm always moved by his heart, wisdom, and courage. I'm just really grateful for his presence in my life. And Matthew, I just want to add briefly that I have really been influenced by you as well. That the community that I grew up in my family home, we had your books. I just always knew you. I always saw your books around, and I read your book, The Reinvention of Work. But even in the monastery, in the Buddhist monastery, your books were there, and you were known to us as a very beloved teacher. And you told a story about a beautiful moment you had with Thich Nhat Hanh. I won't get it exactly right, but it captures just some of the importance of your work and your presence in the Buddhist community. I believe you and Thich Nhat Hanh were at an event together, and he were sitting next to each other, and he said to you, those in the Catholic hierarchy have called me the devil. And you said, well, I have read your book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, and it's one of the best explanations of Christianity that I've seen. Something like that. I'm not getting it perfectly. And he was so moved by that, he just kept holding on to you during that whole event. So that story has really touched me, and it shows, I think, a lot of about who you are, how much you've influenced so many of us. So I'll just read a little bit about you for those who may not know you, the official bio. So Matthew Fox is a renowned theologian and spiritual maverick who has spent over 40 years reshaping Christian theology, challenging patriarchal structures, and advocating for a creation-centered spirituality grounded in compassion, justice, and reverence for the earth. He has authored over 36 books, translated into 48 languages, pioneering an approach to spirituality aimed at reinventing education, culture, and religion. Originally a Catholic priest, Fox was silenced and later expelled from the Dominican order by Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict, for his teachings on liberation theology and creation spirituality. He now serves as an Episcopal priest, having received what he calls religious asylum from the Episcopal Church. Whether it's by developing doctoral and master's programs for theology students to help reimagine our world, bringing his insights about creation and creativity-centered spirituality to inner-city youth, or through his broader teaching as a public voice for just and earth-centered spirituality, Matthew has been consistent in his mission. He has been featured in major media outlets such as the New York Times, Rolling Stones, and Democracy Now!, and has received numerous awards, including the Courage of Conscience Award. So Thank you so much, Matthew, for being with us. I will turn it over to you to speak about your new book.
Thank you, Kaira Jewel. It's a pleasure to be with you and these people whom I've heard about for some time, who are part of your Buddhist Christian community, active and contemplative, engaged and in touch with search for one's deeper self. And I want to thank Adam. First of all, I didn't realize we've known each other for over 20 years. Wow. Because I remember the moment I met Adam, he came to talk with me at a retreat center um, in northeastern Pennsylvania. First time we met, I was so moved by what he was doing on the streets of New York City. So that was a bit of poetry to hear his introduction, and yours too, Jewel. Um, since you brought up that story with Thich Nhat Hanh, and Thich Nhat Hanh has meant so much to me for so many years, and it was my privilege to do some of his walking meditations in Oakland, where he came quite regularly. And then I invited him to come to our university to speak, and he brought 40 nuns and monks with him. And we were sitting in a circle before his talk, and like you said, we were next to each other. He was on my right. And what he said was, he said in a very soft voice, almost whispering to me, he said, the Pope has called me the Antichrist. That's actually the word, which is the topic for today's talk. So that's why I'm kind of building on your introduction. And I said, well, I've read both your books on Christ. And I said, I think you know more about Christ than they do. And that's when he started tapping me on my leg and wouldn't stop. He went on and on this tapping on my leg. And what I realized was, my goodness, this saintly and prophetic man has been called by the poobahs of Christianity an antichrist. And how disturbing that must have been, this sensitive monk and brave monk. And he found a Christian priest and theologian who got it and put the blame in the right place. So it was very moving because it was so human of him. First of all, to be open enough, vulnerable enough to share that story with me. And we had never met before. And secondly, to keep tapping my leg. And it was a realization to me of how profound negativity can be, and yet again how real we can be to one another to heal the negativity. So I just had to pick up on that story because you had your version of it, but the fact that the word antichrist is at the heart of it uh, is a great entrance to our conversation today. So yes, I've written this new book called Trump in the MAGA Movement as Antichrist, Handbook for the 2024 election. Now, I've never myself written much about the Antichrist because throughout my lifetime, I always felt that the far right wing had captured the name, the concept, and I just didn't want to get in that kind of battle. But I had an experience in June this summer. I was in Orvieto, an Italian town, and I was actually teaching a week workshop, and I brought some other faculty with me to honor Thomas Aquinas because this is the 800th anniversary of his birth. And Aquinas is important to me. He was a Dominican, like I was. In fact, I actually counted, did a little math. Aquinas was a Dominican in good standing for 32 years. He died young at 49. I was a Dominican in good standing for 34 years. I was a longer Dominican than Aquinas was. I'm not saying I was better, but I was expelled, as Jewel indicated. But that was my 34th year, so I think it's kind of a fun statistic. But anyway, while in Orvieto, I visited the cathedral there, and there was a painting that really struck me. I stood in front of this large fresco. There was a big chapel within the cathedral, and it covered the entire one wall of the chapel. And I just stared at it. At first, I thought it was Christ, but then I said, no, there's something off about this preacher here. And then I saw the title of the painting. It was the Antichrist. And this preacher's hair was off kilter, and there's like it was part horns and part hair. And I looked more carefully at it. And I was really struck by it. And then I went home, and I felt that, when I was there, I said out loud, I had a friend with me, an Italian friend, who brought me there. And out of my gut, it didn't come from my head. Out of my gut, I said, this feels like Donald Trump. And we can show the painting maybe now. I think it's
Yes.
probably the second painting that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will share my screen and show that.
There we
Just
go.
make it big.
There it is. And there's a lot going on in this painting. I counted 156 different persons in the painting. And it was done by a fellow named Luca Signorelli in 1503, very beginning of the 16th century.
Sorry.
Is when he finished it. Yeah, let's just focus on this first painting. Actually, in the bottom left-hand corner is his self-portrait, fellow with the golden hair, and he's standing next to a fellow in black who is Fra Angelico, the Dominican painter of the 14th century, who actually painted the first two paintings in this chapel. And then he was called to Rome to do more paintings. So no one painted for another 50 years until they hired Luca Signorelli on the left. And but you can see the central figure is the Christ. But let's look at the background a bit. The fellows in black at the back are, one person called them ninja warriors, and someone else called them Ku Klux Klan in black. But they're definitely, there's something definitely nefarious about what they're about there on those church steps. And if you look carefully at people listening to the preacher who's on the pedestal, there's violence going on in the crowd. Some people are bleeding and some are dead. And in the background, there's actually a scene where the Antichrist is raising someone, healing someone, and raising someone from the dead. So the lesson is that the Antichrist has powers, spiritual powers that that are real, that attract people. And in the audience, on the right-hand side, up front, are some famous people of the day, such as Christopher Columbus is in the audience. And remember, this was finished in 1503, and Columbus came to America in 1492. So this is a new famous guy. And so he's making this all very contemporary. And the up in the left-hand corner is the angel Satan being thrown out of heaven, thrown to earth, and that's what's going on there. So there's a lot of goings on here. In the right hand, in the middle, in the right hand picture, near the fellows covered in black, there's a beheading going on. And it's the beheading, we're told, of two prophets, Enoch and Elijah. So there's a lot going on. Now, we'll focus on this. Well, we could move now actually to the next close-up because it will tell us more about what's going on. So we have two close-ups now of this overall painting. We'll zero in on, there we go. Now we zero in on the Antichrist, the preacher. And notice he's pointing at himself. So that's narcissism. Narcissism is a part of the Antichrist. And of course, the devil is whispering in his ear. And you'll notice at the floor of his pedestal, people have left, rich people have left their wares and their gifts, their bribes for the Antichrist. So that's our part. Now notice how the devil and Christ, the Antichrist, share an arm. So it's not just about ideas, the whispering of ideas, it's also actions, the deeds that they have in common. And so the devil becomes the Antichrist left hand helper or guide. That's significant, I think, that they're actually sharing deeds as well as whisperings, ideas, attitudes. Okay, next, please. The next painting then is a close-up of the whispering. And Andrew Harvey pointed out to me that in Islam, the word for Satan is the word for the whisperer, the whisperer. I think that's very interesting that that whispering, being whispered to by the demonic forces is part of the story. Okay, now we might back up to the first picture, which we kind of skipped over, which is the painting by Hildegard of Bingen. Because I want to point out that the history of this archetype, the Antichrist, of course, it goes back to the Bible, the book of Apocalypse, which is also the book of Revelation, because apocalypse also means revelation in Greek. It's a Greek word. So we're living through an apocalyptic time. And as that beautiful meditation that you led us in, Jewel, one of the points you made was that we have to ground ourselves in this difficult time so as not to be blown away, and to root ourselves more deeply. Now, and so the archetype of the Antichrist is named in the book of Apocalypse and also in some writings of Paul, directly, indirectly. And it goes back to the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. So it has a history. And especially in the context of apocalyptic literature. Now, you have it then in the first century. And of course, the writer of the book of Revelations was a very amazing poet. I've often felt he must have been on something when he wrote that book. It's so wild and so full of images and archetypes. But in the 12th century, Hildegard of Bingen lived, a Benedictine abbess and a musical genius, and who wrote the first opera in the West, 300 years older than any other opera, and was a healer and wrote 10 books, many of them on science, and an amazing human being, an amazing saint, recently declared a saint and a doctor of the church. Now, this is her painting of what she calls the man in sapphire blue. This is the healing Christ who is in all of us. He's in all people. And you don't have to be a Christian to be a practitioner with the healing Christ living within you. But it's easy to shift nomenclature too. So the Buddha nature is being named here too. So it's the Christ nature, the Buddha nature. In Judaism, the Salem, which is the image of God that is all of us and indeed in all beings. But if you look carefully at this blue man, he's doing this. And that is the archetype of compassion. You can do it yourself. Put your hands at your side and then lift them up and put them forward. Now do it again and kind of feel what's happening as you do that. It shifts your rib cage, if you will. And what it is, of course, is putting your heart chakra into your hands. It is becoming a healer, therefore. And it's just a marvelous archetype for compassion, what compassion is. And notice his knees. One of his left knee, the knee on the right, but his left knee is bent. So it's about, and Hildegard writes about this, and Eckhart writes about this, running into peace. Eckhart says, we don't walk into peace, we run into peace. So there's an eagerness to do compassion, an eagerness to do tikkun, the healing of the world, an eagerness to put this divine energy of compassion into the world. So all that is symbolized there in this man. And notice at the seventh chakra, it's open. There's a conduit into the two other circles. And the golden circles, she calls these the ropes of divinity. And that represents the creating God. Christ represents the healing God. And then the white, bigger circle represents the spirit, which Jewel was leading us in as we prayed and talking about the breath that we share with all our ancestors. Well, breath and spirit are the same word in biblical languages and around the world. In Africa, the word breath, spirit, and dance all come from the same word. So this is to understand anything about the cosmic, about the Antichrist, we have to begin with the Christ. And that's why I'm beginning with Hildegard's painting of the Christ. The essence of the Christ being the illumination, the illuminating gold here, the duxa, the glory of creation and the creator, which is bequeathed to all of us. And both through spirit, through the creator and creation, and through the healing powers of Christ. And all, as Jules said, all our ancestors who made this commitment in some way to celebrate life, to put biophilia first. I come that you may have life and have it in abundance, as the Christ has said to spoken. Now, over my shoulder, I happen to have a painting up here, which I like a lot. I bought it from a young African-American artist when he was 25 in Oakland, where I lived for many years. And yeah, so that's Miles Davis. And I just think that's also a wonderful expression of the power of celebration and healing that compassion is. And that Miles Davis's life, and he has Miles represented at several eras of his life, young man, middle age, and older. But notice how he got people to dance and to feel and to live fully. And this is what art does. So I want to stress that my book here on Trump the MAGA Movement as Antichrist, it was born of an experience I had from an artist, Luca Signorelli. And that's important to me because I've written two other books on evil. One is big book called Sins of the Spirit, Blessings of the Flesh, Transforming Evil in Soul and Society, big book. but I learned a lot from that because I did a lot of study about all the world traditions and what they say about evil. And of course, all world religions have a lot to say about evil. And a lot of it is subtle. It's not boring, really, not at all. For example, Erich Fromm, the psychologist, who was a Marxist also and Jewish, he had this statement that sticks with me. He says, necrophilia grows when biophilia is stunted. Necrophilia grows when biophilia is stunted. So his definition of evil is necrophilia, which is love of death. And that's very close to the archetype of the Antichrist. The Christ stands for life. I come that you may have life and have it in abundance. The archetype of Christ stands for light. Of course, that's true of Buddha too, isn't it? Even the word enlightenment. And Buddha saying, be a light unto yourself. And Jesus saying, don't hide your light under a bushel, etc. So light, in fact, in a study I did on all the world religions, I found that the word light is the most common synonym for divinity around the world, literally around the world. And of course, the Christ is reported to have said, Jesus reported to have said that I am the light of the world. And so all spiritual traditions gather these kinds of archetypes. And now we're going to see before long that Hildegard, who painted the Man in Sapphire Blue, also painted painting of the Antichrist in the 12th century. So that's 400 years before Luca Signorelli's painting. Now, another thing I have to tell you about Luca Signorelli's painting that we looked at is that it blew Sigmund Freud away. Freud was blown away by that painting. He said it was the most important painting of his life. And Freud loved art. And he made 3 trips to Orvieto to study that painting. He spent days with it. And there's actually a whole book that's been written called Freud's Trip to Orvieto. And it's a really good book and beautifully written and wonderfully researched. And it's done by an art historian at Yale University who is in fact a Freudian. That is to say, he underwent Freudian analysis. So he has a lot of respect for Freud, more than I do. Freud is not my favorite psychologist, except I give him credit. He was a mentor to 2 of my favorite psychologists. One is Otto Rank, who wrote the important book Art and Artist and other book and Beyond Psychology and other books, and Carl Jung. I mean, as you know, both of them studied with Freud and then broke with him. But the fact that Freud, and of course Freud was secular Jew and an atheist, and he wrote 5 different books condemning religion. But for him, who represents the secular left, if you will, I think, in Western intellectual history, for him to be tripping, going off to Orvieto on 3 different occasions to spend time in the cathedral is really stunning. And so my first chapter in the book is on Freud, because I'm taking away from the right wing this archetype of the Antichrist. And I think the fact that Freud got it is of tremendous significance, because it is not the propriety, the trademark of the far right wing in religion. You can use this archetype, we can use this archetype to awaken people to the common good, to justice and compassion. And it's time to take it back. Now, speaking historically, then we've talked about 1st century, the last book in the Christian Bible, written around the year 100, when, of course, the Christians were literally being fed to lions by the empire. So the idea of the Antichrist in that time was they probably had a specific emperor in mind, like Nero. Nero had a special thing in for Christians, and I think a lot of it was that he wanted a scapegoat. Tyrants always want a scapegoat. And the Christians made a good scapegoat. Remember, he blamed the fire in Rome on the Christians, which was not at all factual. But the first lesson of Antichrist is lying. Lying. Remember, Satan is called the father of lies. And that's one of the first elements of the Antichrist energy is to, and that's in contrast to truth, isn't it? Just like light is in contrast to darkness, if you will. And the lying, as is obvious, it's anti-truth, so it's Antichrist. And of course, darkness also is a great wealth of birth and gestation. We lived in the dark in our mothers for 9 months, and we were very content there. And of course, the darkness of the depth of the universe and the entire cosmos. So darkness also carries this great positive energy with it, but it can be another word for that which is without light. Now, Carl Jung, and I only quote him in the conclusion of the book about this, but he says that he did a whole essay on the archetype of the Antichrist. And he says, he warns us, the less the Antichrist is recognized, the more dangerous he is. The less the Antichrist is recognized, the more dangerous he is. So that's why it's important to name the Antichrist and to shed light on it, to bring it out of the shadows, out of that darkness that is shadow. And of course, shadow is Jung's definition for evil, if you will, because that's where if you don't shed light on it, that is where the negative energy builds up. So, first century Book of Apocalypse and Book of Revelation, same book, that apocalyptic time is also a time of great revelation, of great potential, learning deeper new things. 12th century, Hildegard, and we'll get to her painting shortly. 16th century, Luca Signorelli, but also the reformers. Martin Luther used the term Antichrist for 25 years, right up to the day he died. 25 years, it became a very regular pattern in his way of looking at the world. At first, he applied it to the Curia in Rome, that is the advisors of the papacy, of Pope. Then he applied it to the Pope. And then other reformers, Calvin, Zwingli, John Knox in Scotland, also started to use the terminology of the Antichrist. So I mention this because those who come from the Protestant tradition may recognize it. So now we're in the 21st century, and we have a right and maybe a responsibility to bring that language back. Why? Because it is a shortcut for talking about evil. It's a shortcut. Like I say, I wrote this 450-page book, but of course, that's what artists do for us. Whether the artist of the Book of Revelation or the paintings by Hildegard or Luca Signorelli, the artist gives us a shortcut. And that doesn't begin in the head, like I told you, because it was an experiential thing for me. It was in my gut that I felt this presence of MAGA at that fresco of the 16th century. And it was certainly that which hit Freud as well. It was not, and I go into that in that chapter, and it is laid out in this book, that this archetype of the Antichrist hit Freud so strong. His father had just died that year. And so he was vulnerable, as men usually are when their fathers die. And there are many other issues that rose for him, including anti-Semitism, because Jews over the centuries have frequently been accused of being, quote, the Antichrist. So it's not easy for Jews to wrestle with this language. And yet, Freud found it fascinating because it answered a lot of questions for him, and especially about his maleness. Because in the other pictures in the chapel done by Luca Signorelli, two other frescoes, he does a big picture of hell and a big picture of resurrection of the flesh. And a lot of naked men are in these pictures, all of them very physically strong. And Freud had a concern about if Jewish men were strong enough to stand up to the anti-Semitism that was so strong in Austria in his day. So let's now look at Hildegard of Bingen's painting of the Antichrist. So that'll be one of the, there we go. That'll be one of the last pictures. There we go. Okay, well, actually, what I have there, we might as well back up for a minute. Since I knew that we were talking in an ecumenical context here, I just want to point out it's not just the Christians and not just the West who make efforts to paint evil, because that's what the Antichrist represents. That the Tibetan school of Buddhism, and of course I understand that Thich Nhat Hanh was of a different school, but just like in Christianity, you've got Protestantism and you've got Catholicism, you've got Orthodox. There were many schools of Christianity, so you have many schools of Buddhism. But certainly in the Tibetan version, you have this this effort to name evil. So this is one such god, if you will, or demon, that is painted, and there's whole stories behind him and what all these figures in it represent. And then there's a second one as well, and that's another example. And this one's riding a horse and so forth. But I'm just trying to point out that artists in so many cultures and religions do make efforts to name evil. And I just want to point out this is part of the ecumenical wisdom of our time, that we can recognize what we talk about as a common archetype, which is humanity's capacity for evil. Now, if you look carefully at the headdress of this fellow, there are a lot of skulls at the top of his head and so forth. So there are a lot of details here that we don't have time to talk about. But you can find this, I found it online. It was actually an article on 10 examples of evil in Tibetan culture and paintings, Buddhist culture paintings in Tibet. Okay, now let's get to Hildegard's painting of the Antichrist. There we go. Now, up in the left-hand corner, you've got animals, and they're quite specific. She names them. And I have a whole chapter on Hildegard on this painting, a short chapter. This is a very short book, really. But I call it Hildegard of Bingen, the Antichrist as patriarchy. But first, she talks about the warlike man. That's one of the beasts. And then a selfish pleasure is another beast. And then the wolf is those who rob others. And she says the black rope, which they're all holding on to, this represents the darkness that stretches out many injustices. So it's interesting that she lands on the word injustice to name the ultimate work of the Antichrist. But notice what they're doing. They're undoing the ropes of the universe that we saw in that painting of the man in sapphire blue, of the healing Christ. Now, at the bottom of the picture, which is more than half of the picture, you have a picture on the left side of Mother Church which she says is bleeding at the thighs. That red and white on the thighs of the figure are is blood. And there is a giant penis there. And then you have a big figure that has teeth and red eyes that's flying out. And she says that is human dung. That's dung. That's SH blank T. That's what that is. It's BS is what it is. That the Antichrist gives birth to BS. Again, lies, but more than lies. And she says it stinks. It stinks up the whole mountain, she says. This, and it kind of looks like one of these stealth bombers today, too, I must say. This is done in the 12th century, remember. But because she's exaggerating the penis here, and she says that the Antichrist has invaded the church. So she's talking about how the Antichrist invades institutions and culture. In her day, the church was running most things, and she said it has been compromised and even more. So today we can talk about the Supreme Court. We can talk about Congress. We can talk about, well, MAGA. And I have a chapter on MAGA, and I begin it by saying some people call MAGA Make America Great Again. I call it Make America Grotesque Again. And I bring in the history of slavery and the history of the genocide toward the indigenous people, and the lynchings and the Jim Crow laws, and of course the call today to think of immigrants as, quote, venom, unquote, from one particular presidential candidate, et cetera, et cetera. This is grotesque. And then one example for the 19th century. They were so intent on destroying the Native Americans that they went after the buffalo. There were over 30 million buffalo on the plains in America in the 19th century. And when this attack on the buffalo finished, there were 500 buffalo left. Think about that. From 30 million to 500. And it was pure racism. It was an effort to destroy the indigenous people who they knew depended thoroughly on the buffalo for shelter, for food, for medicine. Now, this is all the bad news. And again, let me say this one thing, that this is why I call this chapter Antichrist as patriarchy, because Hildegard, I think, unconsciously is saying that there is a distortion of masculinity that is inherent to the Antichrist. That's why you have a penis playing such a big role in this large painting. Now, in the upper right-hand corner is the Christ. And notice he's holding his fingers, two fingers up like our peace sign. But she says those two fingers represent Elijah and Enoch, which is very, very interesting because they are named in Luca Signorelli's painting, which came 4 centuries later. And she talks about the two walls that the Christ is sitting on. One represents, she says, speculative knowledge, which is mirror knowledge. This is knowledge knowing you are the image of God. Speculum in Latin means mirror. You are a mirror of God. That's the whole teaching of being an image of God. So that's essential for wisdom, to know that you are an image of divinity, an image of the Buddha, an image of the Christ, an image of God. And the other wall is practical knowledge. And together they bring wisdom into the world, and they heal. And all of these negative things being done in the upper left-hand corner with these negative animals, and down at the bottom, all this is not the last word. That the last word is the word of hope and healing that is possible. Now, I want to share with you that she is fierce on this subject of dealing with the Antichrist. This is not for wimps. And I want to share with you a few of her words in that regard, because she addresses the Antichrist. And here's what she says. First, she says the Antichrist is the son of injustice, the cursed one of the cursed ones. She addresses the monster, this monster, the big pile of dung that's flying. Oh, you cave of injustice. Your works seek the pit of hell. You will live absorbed in your gluttony there, and that hellish place will vomit forth stink. The world will recognize in the stench the bitterness of death in the destroyer of destructions. The monster, she says, is the worst of beasts. And he joins up with kings and dukes and leaders and those with money and prestige. Sounds like a presidential election to me. And she says this devil has no power in good things, but only in evil things of eternal death. And she says that greed is at the heart of so much of this, the worst of beasts. And of course, the greed is not just for riches, but for power. Greed for power. So she's giving us permission to tap into your moral outrage here and to put it to good use. So probably I should stop now because we want to have some discussions and we're running out of time. I'm sorry. Remember what Jesus said about evil. It's a very simple, practical lesson. By their fruits, you will know them. By their fruits, you will know them. What are we giving birth to? What are we trying to give birth to? And of course, one of the great evils of our time in this election is that one side is in denial of climate change, of the survival of Mother Earth, calling climate change a hoax. And at the same time is in denial of democracy, not wanting Lincoln's definition of democracy, of the people, by the people, for the people, but a different version of politics of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. And to me, this is where the Antichrist shows, as well as in that version of MAGA and the history that's coming back, and our power is to turn things into grotesqueness. But I do have the longest chapter is on 18 signs of the time of the Antichrist. And I have things in there like Project 2025 and the dark money that has taken over because of Citizens United, that has taken over the country because the very unsupreme court has, see, I'm talking about MAGA, not just the individual named Donald Trump, but we could be instruments for evil, for the Antichrist, just as we can be instruments for the Christ or for the Buddha. And these are choices we make. And that's what an election is. An election is a choice. And of course, the racism and Christian nationalism, the denial of climate, Christofascism, the threats of violence, what I call the so-called abortion laws, which are really a cover-up for men wanting to control women's bodies and choices. And this blueprint for, well, what one person called a fascist paradise, namely the Project 2025. But I chose 18 examples of the presence of the energy of the Antichrist in our midst, because 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And that number is kind of renowned in the Book of Apocalypse for also standing for the Antichrist. So let me close and we can have a discussion. Let me close with one of my favorite teachers. He came to mind during the meditation we did, invited by Kaira. Buck Ghosthorse was a Lakota teacher who taught with me for several years and led me in many indigenous practices, including vision quests and sun dances and of course, many sweat lodges and so forth. But he said to me one day, you know, in our tradition, fear is a door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. Fear is a door in the heart that lets evil spirits in. Now, the heart of my big book on evil is to take the 7 chakras of the East and compare it to the 7 capital sins of the West. because a healthy chakra is about our healthy energy, but an off-centered chakra, I propose, would be about comparable to one of the capital sins in the West. And it really does work. I don't have time to go into that now, but I'm trying to emphasize that each of our chakras is a door. So Buck was talking about the heart chakra, which is, of course, central. And Hildegard paints it in her compassion painting. That energy comes from the heart into the hands, into service, into healing. But that human mistakes, missing the mark, which is the Jewish definition of sin, lays open the invitation for evil spirits to enter our heart or any one of our other chakras, I propose. As Paul said, our struggle is against powers and principalities. Well, those are angels. They're angels in the Jewish cosmology. So he's saying that evil has something to do with the spirit world. And one of the big lessons I learned from my major book on evil is that the opposite of evil is not good. That is the opposite of good. The opposite of evil is the sacred. And that evil operates at the realm of spirit. This is why it keeps coming back. It's immortal. Racism comes back. We thought we had passed these laws that everyone gets to vote, et cetera, in the 1960s on the back of the urging and the suffering of all these people, many of them teenagers who filled jails and some of whom were murdered, et cetera, including the leader, King, martyred. But now we're fighting that battle all over again because we have an unsupreme court that's been taken over by these energies that that are so negative. So that's a big lesson I learned from Buck, that sin is one thing and evil is something else. The sin, the missing the mark of fear, opens the door to something even bigger. And notice it's plural. You don't just let one spirit in, you let a whole camp of them in. So that's one of the elements here. And I think that Americans are very bad at talking about it for at least two reasons. One is a lot of our ancestors, whom we meditate on today, came from other shores. And most of the white ancestors were fleeing bad circumstances, whether it's wars, famine, religious persecution, etc., and came to America. Blacks, of course, came against their will. But and so a lot of white Americans don't want to think about evil because they were escaping it. That's one reason. The second reason, and I think religion, organized religion, has failed so much. They talk so much about sin that they've never even gotten to the realities of evil. At least it's hard to get there. And that's why I was determined to try to get a different language going to think about evil and talk about it, and to bring East and West together, the chakras and the capital sins. There are many other ways you can bring them together too. And so in other words, the very word virtue, for example, it ties into there's an appendix in my book on the precarious masculinity that is part of Trump and part of MAGA. There's a precarious masculinity, and therefore the need to control women's bodies is at the heart of things. And so the whole issue of what is authentic masculinity comes up. And when we're being told to meditate on power, our strength, and those roots, the Jewel was leading us in that meditation. Well, another word for power is virtue. Virtus, the word for virtue, means actually power and strength. But it also comes from the word for man, virility, and virtue are the same root word. So that authentic manhood and masculinity is about the power, the strength, the energy of choosing to do good in the world. Or as Jesus said, by their fruits you'll know them. So let me stop here and invite our conversation.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Matthew. This has been amazing to hear you share. I just wanted to uh, note that in that drawing of Hildegard's, what I saw with that the dung in the lower right,
Uh-huh.
the black figure with the teeth and the eyes, it looked like fossil fuel. That's what I connected it to, was
Oh, wow.
oil, you know? Anyway,
Very
but
interesting. And
yeah.
I thought it looked like a stealth bomber, but there you go.
Yeah.
That's the thing about art, it brings
Yeah.
out all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah. Well, there was just so much richness in what you shared, and I want to give folks the chance to ask questions and share back to you. Are you okay to go past the top of the hour, or do you need to?
Yes, I am. Let me
Okay,
shut the blinds here. It's kind of hitting
sure,
my feet.
sure. And I know some of you may need to head out. We usually close at 9 p.m., but if there are, folks who want to stay on for our questions, and then we'll close with our usual closing poem. Um, and there's a note in the chat, Matt, that in the Tibetan Buddhism, Mahakala is a protector deity, not a demon.
Oh,
Someone is sharing that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because I got these 10 pictures last night when I looked this up. But the there is a capacity, of course, to turn the demons into something positive, and
Yeah.
that's important
Yeah.
too. That
Yeah.
they're they're not condemned eternally.
And the role of the fierce bodhisattva. So in the Asian temples, there's often a gentle bodhisattva and a fierce bodhisattva guarding the gates of the temple, because you need both of those qualities to be protectors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice gentleness and strength. Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
So anybody who would like to either ask a question live, we can spotlight you so Matt can see you, or you can put it in the chat. You can raise your Zoom hand or unmute. Hi, Linda. Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if you want to come on camera, or if you want to just be on audio, that's fine too. Let's see, are you able to unmute, Linda?
Yes, there we are.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Hi. Thank you, Matthew. I know you from way back. Creation spirituality. Uh, I just wondered what your thoughts are on where that places us now vis-a-vis MAGA and Trump and their presence in the world, and just how to place ourselves with respect to them, or how to handle them, or how to think about them, or just sort of how you practically deal with this, because it's a real event right now.
It is a real event. I think this election is going to be absolutely decisive for the future, not just of our country, but of the planet, and of progress that I think humans have tried to make, often one step forward, two steps back, but both regarding democracy or how we govern ourselves, which has always been a struggle, um, and of course economics and politics, all of it. So, well, you do what you can do. It's kind of like Michelle Obama said, do something, but do it out of a deep place, out of the future generations, thinking of the future generations of our children and grandchildren. And this is why I dedicate the book to young leaders who who care about the sacredness of the earth and who care about a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So I think encouraging the younger generation and they're at the same time encouraging people to vote, getting out the vote, especially in the southern states that in our very, very peculiar system elect the president, supporting certain candidates by spreading the word or providing some funding or something. And I think even because this is historical, that's why I wrote the book, to give people a language that isn't just words, but a concept. It's interesting, we began with Thich Nhat Hanh talking about being accused of being the Antichrist.
Wow.
And now some people say, well, aren't you creating division and dualism? And we mystics are against dualism. That's true. But at times, you have to recognize polarity in order to get through to a breakthrough where there will be togetherness again and where justice and compassion can flow. And so there's that to deal with too. I have a friend, Lama Somo, who's a Tibetan Lama, and she talks about idiot compassion, that, idiot compassion is leaving justice out. And I think there's such a thing as idiot non-dualism, because there are polarities. There is night and day, dark and light. And there is good and bad choices and good and bad character. And there's evil and sacred. And they need to be recognized. And that's what Jung is saying too, that you shed the light on this, and then hopefully we can find common ground again. But notice what they're even doing in the picture behind me, blowing the trumpet, that's the prophetic call. As I say, that we're all called to be mystics, which is to be lovers and to create that place of union, but we're also called to be prophets. And Rabbi Heschel says the essence of the prophet is to interfere, to say no. The mystic in us is yes. William James said that. It's the yes faculty. Great. We would love to just say yes in life, but no, we also have to say no at times. And I think especially this critical time, we have to support those who are saying no and running for office, support those who are running for office to say and saying no, and at the same time offering an alternative. So there's a yes in there, and there's a joy built in as well. There is joy in carrying on the prophetic struggle, even when it's hard. And again, I think the civil rights movement is an amazing example of that. My age being what it is, that the courage, but also the joy that that gathered in struggling for justice and for the rights of all. And we've been used for the last 20 years by some very, very powerful forces, and that have invaded our government, often through laws such as, well, as I alluded to, the law that allow dark money to just flood our politics, which is another way of saying, that the billionaires run things. And a lot of them, are not really enlightened people. Not all, some are. But many are shadow-filled.
Thank you so much, Linda. And we want to get to the other questions here as well. So I'll invite Kateri to ask your question, spotlight you. Welcome, Kateri.
so much. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Kaira Jewel and Father Adam, for holding this space. Um, yeah, there's so much richness in what you shared, and something that I'm sitting with is around the Eric Fromm quote about necrophilia and death. And um, part of what I've been looking at in my studies is the way that death phobia is a huge part of our culture, even as there's also this uh, you know, love of death and necrophilia. And I'm wondering, I've thought about the ways that death phobia has contributed to more of the Antichrist in the world, people's avoidance of this beautiful natural process of dying. And so I'm wondering how you might hold different understandings of death, like big D death or little d death, and how you incorporate those natural cycles, even as we talk up against the big death.
Yes, you're probably familiar with Ernest Becker's book, Denial of Death, that won a Pulitzer Prize after he died. He was teaching at University of Vancouver. He wrote it at University of Vancouver, and I was invited to speak there years ago. And his chaplain, this was after he died, told me that when he shared that book, 6 people showed up. 6 people. And he died about a year after. But his last book actually was on evil. It was called Escape from Evil. And but he acknowledged in his book that Denial of Death, that it came from Otto Rank, whom I cited earlier as my favorite psychologist, because it's Otto Rank who really laid out that that when we don't deal with, well, as a culture with death, that we have all these immortality projects. And he said that, and then he went through Otto Rank was a cultural historian, not just a psychologist. And he went through the very meaning of soul is immortality, the quest for immortality. And that originally our species, it was the tribe that was the sign of immortality. You did everything so the tribe could survive. And if you did that, that was satisfying to the people because the tribe did survive. You gave it your all. And then he goes through the whole history of humanity. There's a period when in Greece when beauty was the key to immortality. And in Rome, that law was the key, etc. And then, but he says that we have to do exactly what you're talking about to face the death. Now, he also says, and he was a Jew and not a Christian, but he said what Jesus and Paul together proposed, the idea of, and he says before that, the whole thing of the pyramids was about immortality. If you buried the pharaoh in the most perfect way, then maybe we could participate vicariously in his immortality. And the same idea, he said, fed the whole idea of kingship. The king is dead, long live the king. So people projected their immortality into kings. And now, with capitalism and consumerism, there are people who project their immortality into building big towers with their names on it, or dying with $1 billion in your pocket or something. So all of these are quests for immortality. And then he says that what Jesus and Paul proposed in the first century was, he said, the biggest revolution in human thought, because they proposed the democratizing of immortality. That's what resurrection idea is. Now, again, this comes from a Jew and not from a Christian, but remember, the Jews are the ones who introduced an idea of resurrection, and Jesus picked up on it. He was Jewish, after all, as did his early followers who were Jewish. Of course, the whole reincarnation from the East is another version of addressing this question. But I appreciate what you're asking, because if your culture is missing one or the other, either reincarnation or resurrection, it's very likely that you're in deep trouble, because in this whole, even the empire complex, and trying to, be #1 empire in the world and all that. How much of that is due to this fear of death, you see, this refusal to acknowledge our mortality, but also to acknowledge that there are paths to living beyond this version of our lives. So those are a few thoughts that come to me. And Ernst Becker said in his book, Denial of Death, which won the Pulitzer Prize, that he said, most important book of my life was Otto Rank's book, Art and Artist. And that's how I first met Otto Rank, was reading Ernst Becker book on Denial of Death. And it's Rank who really lays that out, that that the human history has been dictated to by our quest for immortality. And a lot of it has been negative energy, but it doesn't have to be. Again, he dealt with the West and with the idea of resurrection. He didn't go very much into the discussion on reincarnation, but I think bringing those together, that's part of the potential, I think, of ecumenism in our time, that how much do resurrection and reincarnation have in common? I think they have a lot in common. And I think either or both are necessary for humanity to be civil and humanity to be successful. By successful, I mean that our species survive, and not at the expense of destroying millions of other species. And that's where we're at as a species today. That's what it means to talk about global warming and climate change. We've counted about 14 other species today. We know Neanderthal and denizens, but others too. And what they all have in common is they're extinct. These are our cousins. These are our hominid cousins. They've all gone extinct. We're the last ones standing. And the odds on us are not very positive at this time. That's why apocalyptic time of apocalypse is also a time of revelation, that we can wake up and pay attention to what Lincoln called our better selves, and this world of light that we're capable of, and compassion that the Buddha and the Jewish prophets and Jesus and Muhammad and so many spiritual leaders have tried to call us to. And Jesus puts it explicit from his tradition: be you compassionate as created in heaven is compassionate. That our capacity for compassion is a divine quality. And it's there, but it needs work, it needs practice. And it has to say no. It has to have this prophetic dimension of shedding light on its opposite. In the discourse I've been sharing, its opposite would be Antichrist, anti-Buddha, anti-Isaiah, anti-Muhammad.
Thank you so much for that question. And so, do you think you could answer 2 more questions? There's one from Shay and then from Cal.
Okay.
Is that okay? You've got energy? All right. So thank you, Shay. Come on. Can you unmute?
Thank you, Matthew. I got a lot out of this. I really appreciate it. I think the question I have, which I've been listening so intently, I haven't really thought about how to really formulate it. But the real question I have, and you might answer this in your book, is you talked about the Antichrist almost being through history a symbol for evil. And I'm wondering, coming from a Christian, as a child, a background in Christianity, and then re-entering the religion later in life, I still have that big story in my mind of the apocalypse. And I wonder if you believe that Trump and MAGA is like the big Antichrist, or if they're a symbol for evil, for great evil. And let me know if that's a clear question.
Yeah, it's not, I don't see them as the only version of Antichrist. Again, Antichrist is an archetype, and it's a concept, it's a metaphor, it's a way of talking, it's artistic. That's why, again, I emphasized how the writer of the Book of Apocalypse was an artist. He was not being concrete about his current history, but he was being specific. Those who were living that history, they applied a lot of that energy to the Roman Empire that they were suffering under. So again, not we don't want to be literal. And uh, the fact that Mega acts the way it does, um, it kind of plays out the worst elements of Antichrist. So instead of compassion, we have this calling other human beings vermin and all this, and saying they're all rapists and everything. I mean, it's so contrary to the teachings of Jesus, and yet, of course, it's wrapped in a pseudo Christianity, which I would call Christofascism or Christian nationalism, etc. So, they're using everything because lies are at its essence. And but people can wake up about this. And like the previous question was, what can we do? Well, try to wake people up. Use this language. It for some people it's very disturbing, but we need to apply some of the lessons from uh, our ancestors, such as those who wrote the Book of Apocalypse, to the current situation. That's what these other artists were doing. That's what Luca Signorelli was doing. I mean, he had Christopher Columbus in the crowd. I mean, Columbus was kind of the big hero at the time in Europe, not in America or not in Turtle Island. but so and that's what Hildegard was doing too. She was talking about the church in her time that had been taken over by this antichrist energy. And so and then, like I said, she addressed it with fury. With fury, she tapped into her third chakra, her moral outrage. And so there's a tendency in our culture to just kind of let others do it, and lie on our couches and watch the world go by and the sports go by and all the distractions that go by in front of our eyes, with the media, or of course today's social media, which is even crazier. So we have to kind of get a grip, and what are our values? What do we believe in? What does it mean that um, that one party is not only in denial about climate change, but is also posing up to Putin, who just 2 years ago invaded a sovereign country, first invasion in Europe since the Second World War. I mean, that's kind of significant. And yet some people, it just kind of goes over their heads. So you got to do what Hildegard did, and what um, Signorelli did, was to shake people up. That's what art is meant to do. That's what prophets do. I mean, these prophets of Israel did crazy things. One of them took all his clothes and ran around the walls of Jerusalem to get attention, the first streaker. So, you got to kind of rattle some cages. And that's where I think this term of the Antichrist and seizing it back from the right wing and the literalists of the Bible, but realizing that, and it's so interesting that we began with the story from Thich Nhat Hanh, that he had been called the Antichrist by the Pope in my lifetime, and I kept my cool with Thich Nhat Hanh. I just said, well, I read your book, and you know more than they do. But actually, the more I think about it, what a whole thing for anyone to say about this holy man, and especially a pope. I mean, how bad are these popes in our day? Well, I think we have a better one in Francis, but for 34 years, the Catholic Church had two popes who were off the wall. And so, truth, tell the truth and help people to find the truth. And you'll disturb people. That was Jesus' life. A lot of people walked away when he talk, and it was just too much for them. It was too crazy. It was too hopeful and too demanding, the kind of things he was saying. But others, began to get it, especially after the empire did him in, and they realized, hey, there's nothing left but his teachings and his memory, and how do we make something of this? Because we really loved him. We thought he was really onto something. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it helps.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
we'll invite Cal now to ask your question. Spotlight you.
Hello, Kyle.
Hello, Matthew. How are you? Thank you.
Good.
What
Thank
a
you.
brave subject, and thank you, Kaira, for having him on. It's a really, MAGA and his Satan. It's like that's the. In fact, I just little something just came to mind. I went to the Capitol in Sacramento with a protest sign. I got a permit, and it read "MAGA and the occult are oppressing the USA." Right there, the Capitol steps in Sacramento. I thought about that when you
There you
said
go.
rile people up.
Yeah.
but
Okay, to that.
yeah, I get my question for you,
Good
Matthew,
trouble,
is
right?
this.
Good trouble.
I'm sorry.
John Lewis, good trouble.
That's right.
There you go.
um, my question is in the Bible. Um, it's constantly referring to fight, or at least the Old Testament with David and fighting all these evil tribes who actually was worshiping false gods. And then in Revelations, Jesus is writing letters saying that most of your congregation are Satan worshipers, basically. And I'm just wondering, like how many of these people are undercover? That got pentagrams, and I mean, and they're smiling in our faces and walking around. But I'm just curious, what's your sense? Because it's I don't know. I mean, I just feel like there's, we call them narcissists now, I guess. I guess it's kind of a PC term. But how many of these people just are really just all out? They just like burning crosses back in the day they were doing. I mean, how many of these people are getting their powers and their energies and their wisdoms and their um everything from other than God? You know what I mean? How many of these people are, just total frauds, like just total,
Yeah.
you know, like your sense. I
Well,
mean, I know you can't give me a mathematical equation here, but I just like you seem like an OG.
well,
Thank you. I'm a mute.
yeah, I think that's real. I just finished a book um, that was really powerful called Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. Now, Opus stands for Opus Dei, which is a right-wing fascist organization that Pope John Paul II and Benedict sponsored very much, gave them the green light to do whatever they wanted. And they were part of the destruction of liberation theology in base communities in South America and so forth. And of course, I've written about that in my second book on evil, which is called The Pope's War. And where I go into, I have a whole chapter on Opus Dei there and so forth. So there are these powerful, and I also have a chapter showing the connection between the CIA under Reagan, who linked up with Pope John Paul II. In March, 2 months after being anointed as president, Ronald Reagan, all his national security groups met in Santa Fe, New Mexico for like a retreat, all of that, a seminar, for like 10 days to ask one question: how can we destroy liberation theology in South America? And they concluded we can't destroy it, but we can split the church. So they went after Pope John Paul II, the head of CIA, who was a very far right-wing Catholic, probably Opus Dei, he made 30 trips personally to Rome with satchels full of cash, gave them to JP2. I have all this footnoted. And in exchange, JP2 said he would go after liberation theology as Pope. And that's what happened for several years. And now we have this book really lays out the relationship of Leonardo Leo, who's the guy who single-handedly almost appointed 6 of our far right-wing Supreme Court judges. And he is this close to Opus Dei. And so you have, and this is just a real, he really does his homework, all the footnotes and everything here. This is the best book ever done on Opus Dei. Opus Dei is a secret fascist organization started by a fascist priest in fascist Spain that was in very much alliance with the dictator Franco for decades and all the evil things that Franco did. And now they've just blossomed in the United States of America, and especially in Washington, D.C. And they have countless amount of money. Leonardo Leo, you can look him up. I've written about him in my daily meditations. He was given $1.6 billion by a American billionaire a few years ago. And they, that helped to take over the Supreme Court, as they have. And now their eyes, he said it, is on Congress, take over Congress like they did the Supreme Court. And this is such a minority of a minority. They're a minority in the Catholic Church. Now, Pope Francis has tried to heal them, H-E-E-L, I mean, stop them. And, and so forth. So they hate Pope Francis. And, but this is a battle going on right under our noses. And it is for the future of our country, because their ideology is thoroughly Christo-fascist. They want to make America a Christian country in their version of Christianity, which is not even healthy Catholicism. And it certainly leaves out every other religion as well. They're absolutely anti-ecumenical and anti-Vatican II even. So, these are facts of life. And we have to realize it, that this is what's going on in our time. And it's not a picnic, it's serious stuff. Who takes over this richest country with the biggest military in the world at this time in history, etc.? What kind of values are going to be in charge? And this is where this election, couldn't be more important. And we all should be doing something, like Michelle Obama said. And what it is up to you. Maybe there are people here who have contacts in the media who can spread some of this word. I'm more than happy to talk about this to more kinds of people. And others should be too. And the book I wrote, I just felt this call to do it and get it out real fast so it'll help the election. It's a short way, you can read it in a few hours, and it's got these pictures in it. But to start telling the world about this, that this is how you talk in shortcut about evil. Artists do it, and then the stories come out, and all kinds of people. We all have our stories. And about what's positive about America, what's negative, and how to increase the former and stand up to the latter. That's the prophetic call, the no, that we all have to make, as well as the mystical yes, the biophilia, yes to biophilia, no to necrophilia, and all its expressions, and no to lying. That I really think that we talk about the big lie. Now we know, it just came out a few weeks ago, didn't it? That Trump knew on November 13th that he lost the election, and he admitted it. And yet, for 4 years, this is going on, and it's going on again. He's now setting the table for this next election that he's going to lose. If he doesn't win, it's rigged. So this is deja vu. And, we better be prepared because you read Project 2025, and it is a blueprint for a totally different world, a totally different America. And it's got a lot of money behind it, a lot of money. And by the way, the head of the whole project was Opus Dei guy, or at least a guy who's in bed with Opus Dei. Opus Dei is secret. You don't really know who's in it, who is out of it. But the guy who's head of that whole project is very much this far right wing. See, we talk about the evangelicals electing being right wing, but what this book proves, and I've known it, I've been trying to tell the truth for years, is that it's really the far right Catholics who have gathered the money, the power, and just look at the Supreme Court. They've taken that's a third of the government right there, and it's touch and go with Congress, 50-50 practically every poll, and president too. So we're at this place. We've already lost 1/3 of the government, that is the Supreme Court, as is currently constituted. But that can be changed if we get enough people in the other two places, Congress and presidency, because people are waking up. This is serious stuff that's been going on under our noses. And, it's time to stand up.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you for the question, Cal. And I know we're quite late, but I just want to bring attention to Mara's comment in the chat, because I know a lot of people are feeling this way, especially young people, that Mara says, while I feel called to do whatever possibly electorally to oppose the rise of fascism/evil on the state level, I also see such barbarism in our current leaders who continue to provide arms for genocide and feed the war machine. So I think about the evil that has really permeated the entire state is now providing this impetus for people to come together and be led by compassion, justice, and love. So I just, it's something that I know so many of us are like, we don't want Trump or MAGA for sure. And yet it's so hard in a sense to feel, fully behind the other option because of what's happening in Gaza. It's so clearly injustice. And I think it's this dilemma, of how to express the nuances of there's not a clear, untarnished by the Antichrist energy. Oh, you're muted. Wait, let me make sure. Oh, let's see. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing about evil, no one has proprietary rights on it. It's something spiritual. So that's why we have to examine our own party and our own politics and our own souls on a regular basis. We can be participants too. And so that calamity of Gaza and so forth. And of course, so many Israelis are wanting to protest too. I mean, to me, it's not Israel, it's Netanyahu. And we need a president who will stand up to him.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that Harris has learned that. She can't do that now. She's only vice president.
Right.
But she did have that one line. First of all, when he came, she refused to be in the room with him.
Yeah.
And went to her sorority meeting instead. I thought that was a tremendous statement. And also she did say when she did meet him that I will be heard. My voice will be heard. And I think that was a pretty unsubtle way of saying that her policy will be different from the rating policy today. That's my hope. That's what she was saying there. And I mean, she's definitely an intelligent woman and I think a virtuous woman in the sense of sharing many of our values And that would be a big issue, obviously, but first she has to get elected.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah,
And I
and-
couldn't agree more. What we've been
Yeah.
living through, what Palestinians have been living through,
Yeah.
and many Jews. I mean, my closest rabbi friends, their hairs are on fire. Their
Yeah.
hair is on fire
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
what's been happening to the Palestinians
Yeah.
at the hands of the Israeli military and Netanyahu.
Yeah.
So
And I think we can
you're not
elect
alone.
people and push them in the right direction too. Like you're saying, I think there is definitely, uh, the polarity is very super clear, and
Yeah.
and we can elect someone that we think, that still needs to show themselves in this area. It doesn't mean that we're not speaking our truth by electing someone that we still will then need to push to support.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
We still need to
Yeah.
unite, be
Yeah.
critical of in the best sense,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. I'm going to invite Adam to come on and express himself as well, and then we'll close with our Buddhist Christian prayer. We're so grateful for you staying with us so long, Matthew, and everyone else who's stayed on.
Thank
I'll
you for the
spotlight you,
invitation.
Adam. Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing with this group.
Oh.
I was eager to meet them.
Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Adam. How
So
you
good
doing?
to see you.
Good to see you.
Sorry that I missed the first part. I had some church business, but I'll listen to it tomorrow as we have a recording. Thank you so much for being here. It's always good to see you and so wonderful to hear from you, especially on this topic. I was very excited about it because we are in deep trouble as a species, but also in terms of what's happening in this country right now. So really appreciate your message, Matt.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks for your invitation and for your introduction that Jewel read in your absence. It's like a poem.
Thanks.
And yes, we hold you with such love in our hearts, Matthew. This has really been a powerful evening, and I know many people will appreciate the recording who didn't get to be here with us. So thank you so much. We do want to encourage us all to vote on November 5th.
Yeah.
This is a very important thing at the end of something such a deep a reflection. We need to vote and express ourselves at the ballot box. So we will look forward to seeing you all, whoever of you can join in December for a reflection on the year. But let's close as we usually do with our Buddhist Christian Bodhisattva prayer. And I'll share that, share my screen, and we'll read it out. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is confusion, clarity. Where there is sadness, joy.
May I be calm at all times, both now and forever, a protector of those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world.
O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so
As
much.
well.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Matt. See you soon.
Please buy Matt's book and share it with others. We want to get it
Yes.
out to as many people as we can. So
And we will send everyone a reminder and a link to buy the book.
yeah,
Thank you.
Peace.
Namaste.
yeah. Feel free to unmute and say goodbye. Yeah.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Matthew. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Night.
Right.
Keep well.
Yes, you too.